Welcome back to the Maley Way. I'm your host, Jim Maley. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I joined Sarah Olsek on her podcast, the Say More podcast, a couple of weeks ago. She is just starting out. She's just kind of beginning her journey with this whole social media thing. She is a licensed therapist and is trying to kind of expand. And I just really enjoyed the conversation that we had, and I felt that she allowed me to kind of share my story in detail while also contributing some great points herself. So I asked her, I said, "Hey, Sarah, could I include this on, my podcast? Could we use it both on all the streaming platforms and on the YouTube channel?" And she said, "Sure." So here it is. I want you to enjoy, and I want you to give Sarah a follow.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Say More podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Ozick. Again, very happy to be here today with a wonderful guest. I'd like to welcome Jim Maley to the podcast. Jim, welcome.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So Jim is someone that I will share with our listeners that Jim is someone that I just recently met, just a few days ago, actually, through the power of social media. And I'm so happy that he's here today to share his story. If you're not familiar with Jim, I'd love to have Jim introduce himself so you can get to know him a bit.
Yeah, well, I'm Jim Maley, and I know you're in Massachusetts. I had to wear my Holy Cross gear as someone who went to school out in Massachusetts. I'm actually from the Midwest. I live in the Chicago suburbs, but my dad went to Holy Cross, and I ended up transferring from Northwestern out to Holy Cross. I had a great experience there, and I love the East Coast, and I wanted to introduce myself that way. But just in general, I'm a father of four. I have 3 boys, 1 girl. I married my high school sweetheart. I was a former college basketball player at Northwestern who had some struggles, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I've had a couple reasons why I've started to, talk about mental health and talk about my own story in order to try to help others. And that's one of the reasons why I came on the podcast. So I'm happy to do it.
And really just commend you for taking time out of your schedule to be here today and chat about a really important topic. And I think a topic that needs to be talked about more publicly, without shame, without judgment, without fear, because I think that's what can keep people feeling stuck in their healing journeys, right? So I'm really happy that you're here today. So one of the first questions I like to ask all of my guests on my podcast is what mental health means to them. So what does mental health mean to you?
I think mental health I like to think of it as just health, because I think a lot of people kind of separate, the physical side and the mental side. But I teach health class. I'm a PE teacher. And I think the mental side of things is just as important as the physical side of things. And in fact, maybe even more important. And I just try to address it with my students that way. And I try to be really open and honest. And I think mental health for me is just being comfortable in your own skin. And part of that for me has been finding a purpose. And the purpose for me has been, going around and sharing my story to try to help others. And to me, that has improved my mental health tremendously. Just being open and honest and not afraid. It's been a form of self-care for me.
And it's almost like you're being kind to yourself too, right? So I think for many people who experience symptoms of mental illness or know someone in their family that, struggles with mental health, I think there can be this perspective or this reality even, that we're very hard on ourselves. We should be doing this. We should be doing that. Why aren't we in a better place? Why am I struggling today to get out of bed? Why can't I have the energy to take a shower? And I'm really glad that you said this, because part of mental health, caring for ourselves, is being kind and speaking kindness to ourselves. So it sounds like you've really found some purpose in that.
Yeah. And I think to go along with what you were saying, I always talk about like the comparison game. And one of the things that prevented me from getting help was I was comparing my situation. Like I grew up in a good area. I was a good athlete. Things were going great. So I was comparing that to like when I was teaching in the inner city in Chicago. And I was, we had like, I had like 5 or 6 students shot and killed. And I had all these kids who I was teaching who lived in tough environments. So I was comparing myself to that. And I was like, I don't deserve help in a way. And I think when you're struggling, that's one of the worst things that you can do is kind of compare yourself. I think it's great when like I'm doing well and I'm like looking around and I have gratitude for what I have. But when I am deep down in that state, it is one of the worst things that you can do is kind of compare yourself to others. And I struggled with that for a long time.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think this would be a nice segue to kind of talk a little bit about your personal journey, and kind of share with our audience what mental health has been like for you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a long journey, and I finally think I got it figured out in a way. But I really struggled when I was young. When I was 18 years old, I was kind of living out my dream. I was playing college basketball at Northwestern in the Big Ten. It was something that I had always dreamed of doing, and I was doing it at a high academic school. Grades were going well. I was meeting a lot of new people. I was playing on national television, and then it just kind of hit me. And I didn't know what it was, but like I was sleeping for like 16 hours a day and I was becoming like pretty irritable. And I was having like all these racing thoughts going through my head and kind of like irrational thoughts. At this time, I wasn't having like the thoughts of death or anything like that. But like I remember like the day we were playing Michigan at home and I was sitting in my dorm room and I was kind of like shaking uncontrollably. And I would have this thought over and over. Like it was like, I hope I go out and tear both of my ACLs so I never have to play basketball again. And when I say that, like when I go around and speak, like I always say, like that is irrational. It's illogical. But that's what depression does to you. It like lies to you. It makes you think and sometimes do things that you would never do in your right mind. And like it just kept going on and on and on. And eventually I decided like I'm done. And I went in to quit. And to my college coach's credit, his name was Bill Carmody. And this was 20 years ago. No one talked about this, but he called me in and he was like, Jim, you look exactly like one of my former players when I was at Princeton. I think you're dealing with something called depression. And that was the first time I honestly had heard that word before. And but here's what my illogical mind was thinking was like, hey, you're not mentally tough. And that bothered me. He didn't say that, but that's what my mind was thinking he was saying. And like I've considered myself mentally tough, like from bouncing back from failure, playing under pressure, I was mentally tough. Picture this, like I'm 6'7" right now. Well, I was 6'7" then, I'm 6'7" now, I'm 230 pounds. At that time, I was 165 pounds. So I don't know if you could put that in perspective, but I would guess I was probably the skinniest player in the history of Big Ten basketball. So I damn sure wasn't physically tough, but I was mentally tough. And he kind of said, like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, we're going to get you help. But I didn't want to listen. And I got up to walk out, and he said something that I always say when I present. As I was walking out, he said, there's going to be a day in your life where you realize I was right. And he was right. And as I walked out, he said something that even at the time, I was like, that was a pretty good line. He goes, I guess you're just a stubborn Irishman. And it's true.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I was stubborn, but that stubbornness is what helped me get to that point. It's what helped me become a good athlete when I was 65 pounds underweight, become a good student when I really wasn't naturally that smart. But that same stubbornness caused me not to get help for another 10 years. Um, And, I ended up transferring to Holy Cross, had a great experience there, loved it, learned how to speak, learned how to write pretty well. And I kind of felt vindicated. It was like, what? That guy was wrong. He had no idea what he was talking about. But then about 5 years later, it hit again. And when I was coaching in the inner city, and it kind of came to a boiling point when my wife walked into our condo in the city and she saw me like curled up in a tiny little ball underneath a blanket. And I was like crying. I don't even remember this, but I was crying hysterically and I was not making any sense. And she panicked in a good way. She called my parents. This was at like 2 in the morning. They drove down in the city. And that's when they saw it for the first time. That's when like they truly saw it. And my mom then shared her story with mental health, how she was hospitalized when she was 32 years old. She shared our family history, which I had never heard before. And I think a lot of people think like, well, why'd they wait so long? But here's what I always say. First of all, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. No one talked about this. And no one talked about it in general at that time. But the bigger thing is people dealing with depression are become great actors. And I had become a great actor. I had been able to convince everybody that I was okay, but now they saw it. And that's when my mom shared her story for the first time. And I think it was like the impetus that I needed to go get help for the first time. And as she was doing it, I look in one corner and I see my wife and she's crying, and I see my dad crying, and I had never really seen him cry before. And he was like, Jim, this is deja vu for me. 30 years ago, when I walked in on your mother looking exactly the same way, you got to go get help. And like my wife, my mom, uh, my dad, those were the reasons I got help. Like I didn't want to. I was that stubborn Irishman and I did it and it turned out to be a great thing for me.
So,
And I'll go in. There's much more that we can get into, but like that
no, it's
got me to get help for the first time. I didn't want to keep talking. Yeah,
well, I love that you're talking. This is so valuable for our listeners and for me. And I paused only because there was so much to for me to think about as you were telling your story. So many kind of different points that I thought, oh, this would be great to kind of dig into or to unpack a little bit. I think, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. Coming onto a podcast as a former athlete, talking about mental health already is an act of destigmatizing behavioral health. So this is huge. Breaking a lot of stereotypes and stigma, I think, around mental health. So I want to kind of back up a little bit. You talked about your first experience hearing about depression, kind of in your coach's office, him sharing that word with you, didn't really have the language for it. What was that like to hear someone else say, "Hey, I think this is what you're going through"?
yeah. I mean, honestly, I was kind of pissed off because like I didn't not pissed. I don't know how to explain it. Like I just didn't understand what he was saying at the time because I had no education. Like there was no education prior to that. So it was just like I was hearing something different than what he was actually saying. Like I said, like I was hearing like you're not tough. And that's kind of I know I mentioned this in what I wrote to you, but that's kind of one of the myths that I want to clarify. Like to me,
Yes, please do. Please
yeah,
clarify this.
like I used to think like you were soft if you one struggled, two if you asked for help. Like again, the stubborn Irishman in me. I used to think that. And now I don't think I was soft because I struggled. I think I was soft because I didn't have the courage to say something and I didn't have the courage to get help. Like now when I hear a kid come up and talk to me and be like, "Hey, I'm struggling." Like to me, one of the first things I always say is like, I always say, like, that is toughness to me. Like, to me, that is true toughness. And I wish that I could have done that as an 18-year-old kid. And that's kind of like the myth that I want to kind of say is like people who are willing to like stand up and say something and not care what other people think. To me, that is the ultimate level of tough guy. And I know there's a lot of people out there who like say stuff like mental health isn't real. And I might have been one of those guys back in the day. But it's not real until you experience it or until someone that you love experiences it, then it becomes very real. And I just want to encourage people who are struggling to know that like the true toughness is saying something.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's, I mean, we couldn't be more aligned on that message as well. And the other piece I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about is uh, your family dynamic.
Mhm.
So you mentioned a couple things. The Irish side of your family
Mhm.
and kind of culturally what that meant around openness of mental health or lack of openness around mental health. And then this moment in your journey where you were kind of at a very low point and your mom shared her journey as well. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about those pieces. I do think that those are very important for our listeners to understand and hear.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I think I had my dad, he came to one of my presentations for the first time. And I think he kind of feels like he dropped the ball in a way. And I want to make it clear, like, this was just it was a different time. And like, he had no education. Like, he didn't have the education really to address it. And like the Irish Catholic, like we grew up, like you put your head down and you work for what you want to achieve. And if you don't achieve that, you try again and you keep going. And like that's just how it was. And like we're big into humor. I know my whole first part of this hasn't been too humorous, but like we're big into the humor side. And I think that's just how it was. Like we told jokes, we played some sports, we did well in school, but like you didn't talk about these type of things. But I think they would have. They would have talked about it if they saw it. And that's what I want to make clear when I talk to my dad. I'm like, Dad, like I was good. Like I was a good actor. I was able to convince you that like the reason why I was quitting was because like I didn't like the coach or like I didn't like this or I was just burnt out. Like I was good at it and I was good at kind of lying and manipulating. But I do think there was that cultural component. And I will say I kind of see it in some of my students in different cultures. And I don't want to point it out because I don't want to, but there are certain cultures that kind of have this mindset still, and and Irish being one of them. But I see it now, and I kind of want one of the reasons why I'm doing it is to kind of like break through that mindset.
Yes, exactly. And I think I appreciate you sharing that because there are so many people out in the world who are influenced, right, by family dynamics, cultural pieces within their history, their family history. This is very real. And while you talk about kind of the being a stubborn Irishman, right?
Mhm.
That can be very positive. But as you had said, that can also be a barrier to seeking help.
Yeah, I mean, I read a quote like years ago that sometimes your greatest strength can be your greatest weakness if you leave it unchecked. And to me, like my stubbornness is my greatest strength. Like my stubbornness allowed me to do things that I had no business doing. It allows me to like do this whole mental health thing. Like it allows me to just like keep going and driving forward regardless of like the negative noise. And it's mostly been positive, but there is negative. And that stubbornness has helped me in a way, but it really, really hampered me in terms of addressing this issue that I just didn't want to address, and I didn't want to listen to anyone about it for years.
It's something that I do want to amplify a bit here is this notion that everybody's journey is different with mental health.
Hmm.
And they need to be ready themselves to take the next step. So, and I wanted to mention this because, this would happen quite often in the clinical setting when I was seeing patients directly, where they would come in mostly at the encouragement of a family member or friend.
Hmm.
And, they would say, yeah, they're kind of noticing like I'm not, I'm not myself. I'm not doing much around the house. Maybe I'm sleeping a lot. And anyway, they wanted me to come here.
Yeah.
And which is a great first step, right? Just acknowledging that they got into my office, they sat down. That's a huge step.
Hmm.
uh, but it's really part of part of the work is meeting them where they're at, and
Hmm.
so until they're ready to make that next step with their mental health journey and to start learning coping skills, tools, even just having an education and understanding of what mental health is, it's going to be hard to get there
Yeah.
until they're feeling ready for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like for me, I mean, I addressed my mental health in terms of like getting out of that dark place. And it was great. Like I got on, met with a psychiatrist, and he was kind of able to make the distinction, because what bothered me is like, I'm like, my life's pretty good. Like my wife had just lost her dad, and like we were all sad, but no one was depressed. Like the kids that I worked with, they had some tough lives. No one was depressed. That they probably were, but I didn't know about it. Um, but he made the distinction, like there's different types of depression. There's like that situational side, and then there's like that biological chemical component, which he was my mom's psychiatrist and he was my grandfather's psychiatrist. And he was like, that's what goes on, and that's what's going on with you. And like that was like a light bulb moment for me, because it kind of made me understand like why this was happening. Like I was looking at it from the perspective of like, I haven't had any deaths, I don't have a illness, I don't have anything going wrong, and this is still happening to me. And that was like a big light bulb moment for me.
It sounds like from what I'm hearing at least that even that experience was very validating for you,
Hmm.
that not only did this medical provider have a history of your family, but validating that this experience is common and here's exactly what that means for you. So I think again, kind of going back to your earlier point of just having language, having an understanding, like a baseline, just like a baseline understanding of what that is, I think can be a very powerful tool for
Yeah.
people. Yeah, to kind of help get themselves into the next phase of their
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, like it's almost like think of it. I use the term buy-in. It got me buying in for the first time. It got me buying into the mental health. Like my mother sharing her story, that got like that buy-in. Then this guy mentioning those two different distinctions, that got the buy-in for me. Now, I will say like the journey wasn't over, but like I got on medication. I know there's some people who are anti-medication, and I guess I get that in a way until it saves you and gets you out of a dark place. I became a believer. Now it wasn't the total answer. I don't think I figured out the total answer till years later, but at least it got me feeling back to my normal self. And in fact, it got me feeling better than my normal self. So it was a great thing for me, but it wasn't the whole answer.
And that's such an important point as well, Jim, that therapy, medication, a combination of of the two rather, can be a really, really helpful part of treatment and helping people feel better, but it's not always the entire picture.
Yeah.
We often talk about support network, a support group, a few key people who you can count on no matter what, hobbies, activities, finding a purpose. These are all parts of helping us feel mentally well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the big thing too is the fact when I started being open and honest about it. Like when I go around and talk, I'm always like, this isn't necessarily for the person who's in a deep state of depression. Because, like, when I was like that, I was not listening. Like, there was stuff going on in my head. I was not listening. It's more for all of you people around that person to, I call it the tells. I call it my depression tells. It's things that I can't see for myself, but like now my dad knows them. My wife knows them. And like one of the things for me, a depression tell for me is that, like, let's say you ask me a simple question, like, what color is my shirt? Instead of just saying purple right away, there will be like a split second hesitation. And that is one of the things that my dad looks for. And he's like, I think you're going through it right now. And usually he's right. And it's just like that simple tell that maybe is just nuanced with my experience. But I think we all, like people who struggle, all have them. But it's important that you're open with the people around you because I think they could be your greatest advocate in a way.
Again, we fully align on this message, and that's why I love having you on this podcast. It's so nice to find like-minded people in this world, and it can feel very much the opposite of that
Hmm.
for many people. So the more that we can talk about this, share people's stories, I think the more that we can all find validation, connection, and support. And for me, that's the purpose why I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah.
It's not about me. I don't want it to be about me. This is
Yeah.
about my guests and their
Yeah.
stories.
Well, and I think it's true. Like, I'm a man, you're a woman. I'm from the Midwest, you're from the East Coast. Like, we might have different views, I don't politically, but it doesn't matter. Like, this is something that I think everyone can get behind in a way because, and it's not necessarily that everyone experiences it, but you'll know someone who does. And you can be someone that supports them as opposed to making them think that they got to keep it in themselves.
And that's a nice segue too. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your decision to start speaking engagements and kind of telling your story more publicly. If you would share a little bit of that with our audience.
Yeah. So, like, after I got help for the first time, I still kept it pretty close to the vest. And 5 years later, I was teaching and coaching at this all boys Catholic school on the south side of Chicago. And it hit again. And, this time it was worse because I think one of the worst part for me about depression is not like the hopelessness. It's not like the thoughts of death, even. It's that it completely takes away my ability to think logically and make decisions. And that's what was happening to me. Like, I was sitting in front of my computer trying to make practice plans for practice. It was something I was good at and something that would only take me about 10 minutes. And I would be sitting in front of my computer like that for hours with like my wife trying to help me. And like I realized like this was unfair to my players that I was coaching. It was unfair to my students. It was unfair to the school. Like I needed to get myself right and I had to take a leave of absence. Um, Luckily, I got better pretty quickly. They made an adjustment to the medication that I was on, and it got me back. But here became the dilemma. It was like, what was I going to tell these kids? These were, 16, 17, 18-year-old boys from the south side of Chicago. These were tough, hard nosed kids. Like, to me, in my mind, it was like, they're not going to buy into this. They're not going to believe in this. So initially, I was going to lie. I think the plan was I was going to say I had mono, and that was the plan. And my mom, though, she stopped me. And my mom stopped me as I was leaving my parents' house, and she said, Jimmy, there is going to be a boy in that room that hears your story and goes and gets help because of what you tell them. You cannot lie. And as always, my mom was right. Like, I went in and I emotionally told my story in the locker room for 30 minutes to these kids. And not only did they accept me, it was almost a rallying point. I don't know if they had dealt with it or they had people in their family who had dealt with it, but like the minor thing, we won like 12 straight games, and we weren't that good. We weren't that good. We were 2-10 at the time. We won 12 straight games after that point. We beat my alma mater, which was a huge deal for me. But the bigger thing, the big deal was about a month and a half later. I get a knock on my office door, and one of my players walks in, and I could just tell. I could just see it in his face. I could see it in his eyes, and I knew. And I called him in, and we talked for like 30 minutes, and he was really struggling. And we ended up getting him the help that he needed with our school psychologist. We called his mother. They connected him with a therapist, and he got better. And he ended up playing for us later that year. And I always think back to that moment, and I'm like, this was a kid that I yelled at. This was a kid that I had made run. This was a kid that I had gotten on. Would he have gotten help if my mother hadn't convinced me to share my story? Maybe, but I think most likely probably not. So from that point forward, I decided, like, when I see a student struggling, when I see a player struggling, I'm going to say something, and I'm going to share my story with them. So I started doing that, and great results. And, but then I go to a new school, and I'm at Conant High School, and it was in my second year there, my mom died. And they asked me to give the eulogy at my mother's funeral. And my mother was a very, very popular woman. It's probably one of the reasons why I was so shy, is that she was always talking to everyone. And it was a packed house at St. Cletus Church. And I got up and I said all the right things about how she was a great mother, a great wife, all that stuff. But then I closed, and I was kind of debating whether or not to do this, but I closed with how she helped me the most. And how she helped me the most was convincing me to get help that first time, and then convincing me to share my story. And me and my wife joke around about this a lot, but like at that point, this was only 7 years ago, I knew no one who struggled with mental health besides myself. But after that point, I knew a lot of people. And the reason why I knew a lot of people is because they started telling me, they started texting, calling, stopping me in public, being like, hey, I was at your mom's funeral. Thank you for saying something. So after that point, that's when I decided, like, you know what? This is helping people. I got to do it on a bigger scale. And I started speaking at my own high school, and great results, like amazing results, like life changing, life saving results. And then I did it at another school. But then COVID hit, and that completely derailed me, and it got me into my deepest, darkest time. But it also saved me in a way, because it made me realize that I had to focus on more of that self-care aspect. And it took me a couple more years, but then I got back to speaking again. And now I've been going around talking, um, doing podcasts, my own podcasts, and like my buddies who I grew up with like are like laughing, because I was the quietest kid that you ever wanted to know back in high school. Like, the first words that I spoke to a girl were to like my wife when we were a senior in high school. Like I was not this person and now I'm doing this, but I'm doing it because I see the power that it has.
So I think it's a wonderful example of the power of speaking up and speaking out, especially from a position of not only lived experience, but of also being in the public eye, the
Hmm.
immense power that that has, and the ability to impact others as well. You know, it makes me think about the singer songwriter Noah Kahn.
Hmm.
And I think, actually, I think you and I talked about this before this podcast that um, I had watched his documentary on Netflix,
Yep.
and if listeners have not watched this, please watch this. It's an amazing documentary. It's called Out of Body, and Noah very candidly talks about his experience with mental health. Not
Hmm.
only that, but also body dysmorphia
Yep.
and the challenges and struggles that he went through. And it also frames how he found meaning again and his what it means to him to make progress in his life around being mentally well. And I bring this up because this is the exact reason why we need strong voices like you, like others in the public eye, to share about this topic because we can't destigmatize mental health without reducing shame. And
Hmm.
we can't reduce shame without being comfortable. And we can't be comfortable without talking about it. So all of these steps have to happen. And for you to be in that position now is truly a gift. And I love to hear the impact that your story is having for others.
Yeah, no, and it's well, to get to Noah Khan, like I had a colleague that had been telling me like, Jim, you got to get into this guy. Like this guy's right up your alley. And she's like a 25-year-old girl, and I was like, whatever. Like this is probably a young person's person. But then I did watch. I haven't finished it yet, but my wife was gone. I watched the documentary, and I was like, oh, I really like this guy. Well, one of the reasons I really like him too is I felt like I like the self-deprecating humor, and I feel like he's
Yes,
able to bring that in along with the serious stuff. And to me,
totally.
yeah, to me that gets me that gets me like into someone. Like I like when people have that ability, and he clearly does. And I think that's part of his purpose. Now his purpose is obviously making a ton of money making music, but um, he is a mental health advocate, and I feel like to me in a way I have found a purpose that I never thought I would have found. Like I thought my purpose initially was playing basketball. Like that was my purpose. Then I thought it was all, I don't know, it's coaching basketball. And I always say like I was a pretty good player, average coach, but this I think I'm not there yet, but I think I have potential to be really good at it. And I feel it. I hear people tell me, and it keeps me going. And it's a purpose that has not only is it for helping others, but it helps me as well.
I will say you are excelling
Yeah,
in you are excelling as a speaker and an advocate for mental health uh,
thank
by
you.
saying yes, yes, by saying yes to these opportunities, by putting yourself out there, by talking with students who you see, you're observing that they are struggling. That's what it's about. And I don't think you.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. Like, one of the things that got me back because that COVID, that was like when the suicidal ideation started happening, and one of the ways that got me back, I ended up stopping coaching and I stepped down. And this guy from the Daily Herald, which is a newspaper in Chicago, he called me up and asked me why. And I went into it. And he goes, Jim, this is amazing. I love that you're saying it. Do you really want me to publish this? And I said, yes, I do. because there's probably someone else out there who struggles with the same thing. And about 2 days later, I get an email from a former student who I had never met before, but she was a student at the high school that I went to. And the top of the email said, "Mr. Maley, you saved my life." And she said, "I was in that auditorium when you first spoke at Conant, and I was crying because you were speaking directly to me, and I got help because of what you were saying. And I just wanted you to know that, and I want you to keep doing it." And that kind of got me back to speaking again, because hearing that impact, and since then, I've heard similar things from different people, even from that girl's mother wrote me something very similar. And I have people come up to me in person. I have them write years later. And to me, those type of things are what motivate me to keep going, and something that I wish I had as a kid growing up. And, people can be out there saying mental health isn't real, all that stuff. It is. And I'm here to say it. Um, and luckily, I think it's registering with people, and not just kids. A lot of times it's been adults, like it's been the teachers in the room, or when I go and speak to a group of adults, sometimes I think it's even more impactful because those adults, the kids kind of get it a little bit more in my eyes. Like they understand it. They have been educated. You said the language, like they have a little bit more of the language. Now it's not there completely, but to me, it's better than like the 40-year-old men like myself who didn't grow up like that. And I've gotten that out of it too, is hearing them saying like, "Hey, I get it. You really helped me today." And I think that's cool.
So, a couple things I just wanted to touch on here. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I think the kids now get it because they have us.
Yes.
They have us. They have people in their corner shouting as loud as we can for them and to be a support for them about their mental health, right? So that's number one.
Yes.
And I love that shift. I love that shift so much because that's what's going to change, like societal norms. That's what will change it. Um, and to go back to your point, 20 years ago, even myself, like growing up, that mental health was not a topic people
Yeah.
brought up, uh, especially like high school, college. Um, it just wasn't around. And we as a society, I think, have really evolved past that point. I see it even on social media, right? Podcasts, singer songwriters talk. I mean, it's out of the shadows now.
Yeah. Yes.
And what a gift that is, because the more that we heal and we talk about this openly, the more that our kids and their kids won't have to go through what we went through.
Yes. And one of the things that I always say too, like when I speak, I lead with a disclaimer, because I had this student who came up to me once. I don't know why they said it. It was like during class, and they were like, "Mr. Maley, you're just a gym teacher." And I was like, you know what? I'm going to use that line. So I lead with a disclaimer like, "Listen, I am just a gym teacher, and I don't want like the mental health professionals thinking that I'm trying to infringe upon what they do. I like consider myself the Jerry Maguire of depression. Like I'm that agent to try to get, someone in that audience to realize that, hey, I'm struggling. I need to go get help." Like, and sometimes they'll come up to me and I'm like, "Listen, I will talk to you, but I'm not that answer. I am the person to get you to the answer. But I will talk to you because sometimes I do think it's beneficial to talk to someone who has struggled. And I will talk to you about that till till midnight, but you need to go get help." And I always like try to say that so that people understand like I get my role, And I'm just trying, like, as a sports analogy, I'm trying to be an all-star in my role and get you to the superstars who can really help make the change.
And I will say that the mental health providers of the world, myself included,
Hmm.
we need people like you. We need to build a network. I think about it like truly like a net, right? So if someone's falling, that they've got this really sturdy, strong net underneath them. Now that can't be done with just one person.
Yeah,
So we need people with lived experience. We need strong voices. We need male voices. We need a community of people to support an individual. So it's not just, right, the therapist, it's not just the doctor or the prescriber or the coach. It's everyone together saying the same message that,
yeah,
hey, what you're going through, I can help you. We can help you. You're not crazy. We know what this is, and there is help available. Yeah.
yeah. No, exactly. And I think that's kind of the message that I have been, really trying to get across. And I do think it has really registered, specifically like with the people that I'm teaching, with the boys. I mean, it registers with everyone, but I teach two classes that are called advanced basketball, and it's pretty much all boys. And since I started like being vulnerable, like my teaching has just skyrocketed. And it's one of the things that I try to tell teachers is that, like, we were always taught, like, yeah, you don't share anything personal with your students. And I get that. But with something like this, specifically with what some of these high school boys are going through right now, like, they need someone talking about it. And I'm willing to be that person.
So, Jim, June, I'm sure you are very much aware, is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Hmm. Yes.
And, you talked about being a voice as a male for these boys. I'd love to kind of get a little bit more into that if you don't mind sharing some of your thoughts, why it's important for boys. Really, I mean, for anyone, but particularly for boys, to see a strong voice, a male voice in the mental health space. Why do you think that resonates for them?
I think it just resonates because I think there is that the stigma is still there for everyone. But I think the stigma is still much greater right now for those boys and men. Like, you look at the statistics, I don't have them in front of me. But when I teach health class, we go through them, and like, boys are not getting help and they're dying by suicide way more. And I think sometimes seeing someone who, they respect or they kind of look up to, I think that really helps. And I'm not, I do think the fact that, you know, I played college basketball, I think that helps me kind of get the buy in. I think the fact that I'm 6'7", I think helps get the buy in. Like, during class, I still play with these kids and I like talk trash to them and they like it. Like, it's like, it gets me the buy in so that when they're struggling, they like think like, hey, Mr. Maley's someone that I can talk to. And again, it's not the answer, but then when they come and talk to me, I can then bring them down to, one of the social workers at the school, and they can get them the help that they've needed. And it's happened over and over again.
So, what I hear you saying is that you are a safe person for these boys.
Yeah, they know I'm not going to judge them. Like, I'll talk trash to them about their jump shots, but I'm not going to talk trash to them about this.
And you know what? You need that banter. You need the humor. You need the digs. Like that's also, I think, what some boys respond to. But but truly you are also a very safe person for them. And I think that's one of the myths that I want to dispel, especially around Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, is it's okay to be a man who expresses vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's okay to share your struggle, and that does not make you weak. In fact, you become a safe person for someone else
Yeah.
to then feel comfortable with. So I wanted to just mention that as well. And what a great example you are for your students.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Any other myths that you would like to kind of get at today, that you would like to share with other people just around mental health, men's mental health? Would love to kind of hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, when we're talking about like suicidal ideation, like during COVID, that was the first time where I felt like my natural chemical depression and then like a situation really kind of bothered me. And it kind of like collided, and it was depression on steroids in a way. And, I started having those thoughts. And I started having those thoughts of like when I was driving to school, just like driving off the side of the road. And like I had two kids at the time, a wife, a great wife who loved me. And I'm thinking about doing this. And fortunately, I told my wife, and she ended up saying like, "Hey, no more temporary solutions. We need to find a permanent one. You need to be hospitalized." And it turned out, as much as like I was thinking it was going to be like, have you ever seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yes,
So
yes.
that is like my impression. I thought it was going to be like a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest situation, but it was actually a great thing because I saw all these people who they weren't crazy. Like there were some super successful people that were in there with me and who were going through something very similar. And like I learned in there that I needed to be more preventative. Like I needed to not just be reactive to when I got super depressed. I needed to prevent it from happening. And I learned some different tools in there. One, they got me in touch with a therapist, which the therapist really helped me during the COVID time. Now, what's cool about the therapist is she was like, "Jim, you graduated. Like you get like she didn't keep me there to like burn me for every dollar that I had. She was like, "I think you got it. And if you ever want to come back to me, I am here for you." And I thought that was awesome. Like she gave me some tools that really helped me during that time. When I was in the hospital, I don't even know if this is true or not, but I'm going to live by it. Like when I was in there, they started talking about the link between dehydration and depression, and how like it's not going to like it's not going to get you out of some sort of depression, but like if you stay hydrated, it's going to lessen the symptoms. And when I was in the hospital, I was like in this meeting, and I like snapped up, and I was like, holy shit, I have been dehydrated my whole life. Like I was a milk drinker, and we just did not drink water. Like coaches back in the day said you were soft and like whatever. And so from that point forward, I started like being relentless, staying hydrated. And, I don't know what it's been, whether it was those tools that my therapist gave me, whether it was the adjustment to medication, whether it was like these self care tips. But once I got out of there, like I have never been better. And I always say I'm a gym teacher, not a scientist. I'm not going to conduct experiments to figure out what it is. I'm just going to continue to keep doing those things. And I always say, I think it's nuanced. Like it's a nuanced thing, both in how it comes about and how it's treated. So when I share my story with kids, I always say that, like, hey, this worked for me. That doesn't mean it's going to work for you. But what isn't nuanced is that you can't do it alone. That is something that I think is across the board for everyone.
And I really appreciate you sharing such a vulnerable part of your mental health story with, being hospitalized at an inpatient psychiatric facility, and really dispelling the myths around what that experience can be for people. I wanted to just touch on a point that you said earlier where you were hospitalized with many different people, right? From probably all backgrounds, walks of life, professions. And something that's important to understand is that mental health does not discriminate. It affects, it can affect everyone and anyone.
Yeah.
And so that's a myth that I like to really challenge, both, in my professional role, but in my personal life too, that, um, I mean, as you said, you can be a professional athlete and struggle.
Yeah.
And, for me, when I was seeing clients directly, it was in a community mental health setting. So, I mean, we would have folks walking in directly from the community that I was serving. And I would see firefighters, fishermen, police, military, former NFL players.
Hmm.
Um, I would see uh, literally everyone
Hmm.
because it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone, and we need to be there to support anyone that's looking and seeking for seeking treatment or seeking help, I
Yeah.
should say.
I feel like this your little thing is the exact one of my PowerPoint slides when I present is like depression can happen to anyone at any time. And I always say, like, it doesn't matter black, white, gay, straight, rich, poor, it doesn't care. Um, and I think that's something that people need to know. And I think it's kind of like that whole getting back to that whole comparison thing. Like, you can't compare what's your situation to others because it can affect anyone at any time. And sometimes when you compare, that's going to cause you not to get help.
We're all running our own race, but it doesn't have to be alone.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, one of my last questions for you, Jim, what would you hope that listeners walk away with from today's conversation?
I think, a couple things is that, first, you can't do it alone. Like, I think if you're struggling, you need to go get help. And I don't know what that help is for you. I just know that there are professionals out there who are trained in helping you, and they've been able to help me, and I've seen them help other people. I think you got to learn to trust those people and realize that it's not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a sign of strength. And then the message that I always talk about is that I always talk about share selfishly. And I think it's oxymoronic and it's intentionally meant to be like that because obviously sharing your story is an unselfish act. But here's what I mean by it. When I was coaching, I used to always say, when I was a player, I would always want to set screens for people. And you might not have a basketball background, but I'm trying to explain it. Like when you set a screen for someone, it is a completely unselfish act. It's to help them get open. That's 90% of the reason why you do it. But 10% of the reason why I would do it is that when you set a great screen, you end up being able to get yourself open. And so when I started doing this, I started thinking about it. I was like, I need a sports analogy. And the sports analogy that I came up with was share selfishly because 90% of the reason why I'm doing this is to help all these other people. But 10% is when I do it, I get a boost. Like I talked to you about this the other day. Like after I was done talking to you, I felt better. I'm going to feel better after this conversation. Every time I go speak in front of people, I feel good about it. And so I always try to encourage people to share selfishly, and it doesn't have to be about mental health. It could be like you've struggled with divorce, you had cancer, you had a learning disability, whatever the case may be. When you see someone else struggling with that, let them in, because by letting them into your story, you're going to make them realize that they're not alone. And I think that's an important part in terms of like being that Jerry Maguire, that depression agent. Like, in order to get people to people like you, sometimes they need to hear someone be vulnerable about it.
I think more than sometimes, Jim.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah.
And I completely echo what you said. And just again, so very appreciative of you being here today and being on my podcast. Truly, this was a gift. And I'm so glad that we met. And if people are listening to this episode and want to follow along on your journey, are you on social media? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is the MaleyWay.com. You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram at the Maley Way. Now, I will let you know there's a lot of stuff on there. It's not just the mental health stuff, but I think I've had a lot of stuff with like my family and my kids on there. And I think I told you this. One of the reasons why I do that, I know there's some negatives behind that. However, I do feel like there needs to be hope for people who are struggling. And the reason why I share some of the stuff with my family is to let people know that there is that hope. Like, that you could be in the deepest, darkest place, you could be hospitalized, and you can get your way out of it. And one of the ways that I do that is to show the joy that I have with my kids, with my wife. And that's why I do that. And then you could also find the podcast, which also has, a podcast that I do with my wife, which we call I Love You, But. And basically, it's like, you might not be a Seinfeld fan, but it's like the airing of grievances, which we have. But we do it in a fun, happy way. But I will say, I recommend any married couple obviously go to couples therapy if you need it, but also sitting down for an hour with my wife and talking about like the different things that I do wrong has been so great for our marriage. And I think there's a lot of people who get a lot of joy out of listening to it.
I'm going to have to check that out, Jim.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. Yeah, try it with your husband. It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as a marriage therapist, it's something that I can recommend to people. So thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
I will check that out for
Yeah,
sure.
I think it has been so good. Like, cause I have 4 kids, and trying to sit down and talk to my wife is almost impossible. But now this is like our date night every
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your scheduled time that you're gonna have with your wife, and it's a great like bonding connection. Yeah, there's a lot. I'm really gonna check that out for sure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you should. She's way better. She is way better than me at it, at the podcast side of things. She's very funny, and I kind of play. I always say I play the dumb idiot, and she says, "No, you are the dumb idiot."
I love that. I love
Yes.
that. Well, thank you everyone for listening. This was truly an incredible episode. I can't wait to see you all next time. And until then,
Because that's the Maley Way.